The royal decree arrived on parchment stained with blood, not metaphorically, but literally, because Alpha Theron Draken had torn it from the High Council's hands with his bare teeth before his advisors forced him to sign it. The document declared what everyone in the Silverstone pack already knew. His twin heirs, Alexandros and Cassandra, age 7, had driven away their 43rd caretaker in 18 months, and pack law demanded they be declared feral if a keeper couldn't last a full moon cycle. Theron crumpled the decree in his fist as he stood in the throne room, his second-in-command watching with worried eyes, because feral heirs meant execution, and execution meant the end of the Draken bloodline that had ruled for 3 centuries. The last Maid had lasted 6 hours before the twins locked her in the dovecot with a starving hawk. "Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about fate, pack hierarchy, and the dangerous line between love and survival." No one expected Calliope to answer the posting. She arrived at dawn 3 days after the decree, wearing a cloak so threadbare it might as well have been mist, her belongings tied in a scrap of cloth that suggested she owned nothing worth protecting. The pack guards at the palace gates didn't recognize her because banished wolves lost their scent markers, became ghosts in their own territory, invisible to the magical bonds that held packs together. She'd been gone 5 years, exiled under pack law for a crime she still wouldn't name, and she walked through those gates like someone who'd already died once and found the experience disappointing. The steward, an ancient wolf named Philippos who'd served 3 generations of Drakens, looked at her application with the enthusiasm of a man examining a suspected plague rat. "You understand the situation," he said, not quite making it a question. "The Alpha's children are exceptional." Calliope's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Exceptional is what people call monsters when they're too afraid to use the real word. Philippos's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Most applicants tried to pretend they hadn't heard the rumors, hadn't seen the carriages departing at midnight with sobbing women clutching torn dresses and scratch marks. "You've heard the stories, then." "I've heard the twins once filled a governess's shoes with live scorpions. I've heard they speak a language no one else understands, that they're bonded in ways that violate every natural law of pack hierarchy, that the girl has her father's battle fury and the boy has something darker, something that tastes like forbidden bloodline magic from before the Great Cleansing." Calliope leaned forward, and her eyes held something that made Philippos step back despite himself. "I've heard they're wild because no one's been brave enough to meet them where they live, in that space between human and wolf where the rules don't apply. I've heard everything. I'm still here." What Philippos didn't say, what he couldn't say because pack law forbade speaking of banished wolves' crimes, was that he remembered Calliope. Remembered her from before, when she'd been the daughter of the pack's head healer, destined for a position of honor until the night she'd broken a blood oath and been cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back and a brand burned into her wrist that marked her Omega status, the lowest rank, reserved for traitors and cowards. The brand still showed when her sleeve slipped. Philippos saw it and made his decision. "The Alpha will see you at midday," he said quietly. "Don't make me regret this, Mercy." Theron Draken was exactly what Calliope remembered, and nothing like she'd prepared for. 5 years had carved him into something harder. Grief and rage welded into a weapon that sat on a throne and ruled with absolute authority because pack law said the strong commanded and the weak obeyed. His mate, Celine, had died bringing the twins into the world, a hemorrhage that no healer could stop, and something in Theron had died with her. The softness, the part that believed in gentle solutions. He looked at Calliope like she was an equation that didn't balance. "You're banished." "I am. Pack law says I can't employ banished wolves in positions of trust. Caring for the heirs to the throne requires absolute loyalty." "Then why am I here?" Calliope kept her voice level, didn't let him see the fear that crawled up her spine like ice water, because alphas could smell fear and it made them cruel. Theron stood, and his presence filled the room like storm pressure. "Because you're the only applicant in 3 months. Because my children are 1 week from being declared feral and I'm desperate enough to break my own laws. Because..." He moved closer, studying her with eyes that had forgotten kindness. "Because Philippos says you used to work with the wounded wolves, the ones who came back from battle with their minds shattered, and you had a gift for reaching them in the darkness. That was before. Before you broke faith with your pack. Before you committed whatever crime earned you that brand. His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist, yanked back her sleeve to expose the Omega mark burned into her skin. Tell me what you did, and maybe I'll trust you with my children. Calliope pulled free with strength that surprised him. I saved someone I shouldn't have. That's all you need to know. The silence stretched like a bone about to snap. Then Theron laughed, and it was the sound of something breaking. You'll start tomorrow. Survive 2 days and I'll pay you enough to leave Pack territory and start over somewhere far from here. Fail and... He shrugged. The last maid is still recovering in the healing wing. We have excellent physicians. And if I succeed, if I last the full moon cycle. Theron's smile was sharp as broken glass. Then we'll discuss pardoning your banishment and restoring your rank. I'm told you were born Alpha adjacent, that your bloodline traces to the first packs before the hierarchy solidified. You could be powerful again, Calliope. If you're strong enough to survive my children. It was a trap and a test and possibly a death sentence. But Calliope had stopped caring about survival the night she'd been banished with her father's disappointed face burned into her memory. I'll take the position. One more thing. Theron's voice dropped to something dangerous. The twins have a tutor, Nikolaos, who's been with them since birth. He's complicated, brilliant scholar, questionable morals, and the only person they tolerate for more than an hour. You'll work with him or you'll fail. Choose cooperation. Calliope should have asked more questions. Should have demanded details about this tutor, about what complicated meant in a palace where the heirs were considered half feral. But she was exhausted and desperate, and the Omega brand on her wrist throbbed with remembered pain, so she just nodded and sealed her fate. The twins' quarters occupied the North Tower, deliberately isolated from the rest of the palace because their screaming fits could shatter windows and their play sometimes involved fire. Calliope climbed the spiral stairs at dawn, carrying a breakfast tray that felt absurdly domestic considering she was about to meet 2 children who'd hospitalized 43 adults. The guards at the tower door looked at her with pity. Don't turn your back on them, one muttered. And if Cassandra starts purring, run. The door opened before Calliope could knock. A man stood in the doorway, tall, angular, with scholar's hands and predator's eyes. His dark hair was tied back carelessly, and he wore the simple robes of a pack educator, but there was something about him that suggested violence barely contained. This had to be Nikolaos. You're the new sacrifice, he said pleasantly. How refreshing. Most arrive looking hopeful. You look like you've already accepted death. I find it saves time, Calliope replied, matching his tone. Are the children awake? The children are always awake. They don't sleep like normal wolves. Something about their dual bond keeps them in a constant state of heightened awareness. It's fascinating from a scholarly perspective and exhausting from a practical one. Nikolaos stepped aside, gesturing her in with an elaborate bow that mocked courtesy. Enter at your own risk. I'll be in the library if you need someone to identify your remains. The tower room was chaos structured as a child's fantasy. Books piled like fortress walls, scientific equipment scattered across tables, weapons hung at child height on the walls, and everywhere were drawings. Charcoal sketches of wolves mid-transformation, anatomical studies that showed disturbing accuracy for 7-year-olds, and stranger things. Symbols that looked almost like the forbidden old language from before the packs unified under a single law. Alexandros sat by the window, perfectly still, reading a tome that should have been too advanced for his age. He had his father's dark coloring and something of his mother's delicate bone structure, creating a beauty that would be devastating when he grew into it. He didn't look up when Calliope entered. Cassandra hung upside down from a ceiling beam like a bat, her wild blonde hair defying gravity, her golden eyes tracking Calliope's every movement. She smiled, and her canines were too sharp. New maid, she announced. Alexandros, we have a new maid. Should we start with the scorpions or try something creative? Mother used to say creativity was the soul's way of reaching toward the divine. Alexandros turned a page, still not looking up. Perhaps we should honor her memory with something poetic. Calliope set down the breakfast tray very carefully. Your mother also used to say that strength without discipline was just cruelty wearing a crown. I knew her before. That got their attention. Both children went utterly still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence in predators. Cassandra dropped from the beam with inhuman grace, landing in a crouch that put her between Calliope and her brother. Liar, she hissed. Mother died when we were born. No one talks about her. Father made a decree. Your father made a decree that no one should speak of her grief, Calliope corrected gently. Not that she should be forgotten. Celine was the best healer our pack had seen in generations. She taught me herb lore when I was 14, before I had any gift for it, because she said healing was about patience as much as power. She knelt slowly, bringing herself to eye level with Cassandra. She had a laugh like bells and she collected feathers from every bird species in our territory. She kept them in a wooden box carved with moon phases. Alexandros stood abruptly, his book forgotten. The box is in Father's chambers. He locks it away. How do you know about the box? Because I helped her collect the last feather, 3 weeks before she died. A golden eagle. She said it was a sign that the gods approved of her pregnancy, that her children would be fierce and free. Calliope's throat tightened with memory. She was wrong about many things, but not about that. The silence in the room changed texture, became something fragile. Why did you come back? Alexandros's voice was soft, dangerous in its intelligence. You're banished. The brand on your wrist says Omega. We can smell the shame on you even without pack bonds. You're broken. Why would broken things try to fix other broken things? It was the question Calliope had been avoiding for 3 days. But these children deserved honesty if nothing else. Because I'm tired of running. Because when I heard about the decree about 2 children being declared feral just for being wild, I remembered what it felt like to be cast out for being different. To be judged by people who never bothered to understand. She met Alexandros's eyes, then Cassandra's. And because your mother asked me once to promise her something. She made me swear a blood oath the night before she went into labor. The temperature in the room dropped. Blood oaths were sacred, binding, the kind of magic that predated pack law and couldn't be broken without paying a terrible price. Cassandra moved closer, her sharp nose almost touching Calliope's throat, scenting for lies. What did she make you promise? That if anything happened to her, if her children ever needed someone who would see them as more than monsters or tools or political inconveniences, I would come back. Even if it cost me everything. Calliope pulled back her sleeve completely, showing the Omega brand and something else. A second mark beneath it, older, silver instead of black. The mark of a blood oath fulfilled. I broke my banishment to honor her memory. Your father doesn't know. If he finds out, he'll execute me under pack law. So yes, I'm gambling my life that you two are worth saving. Prove me right or kill me. But don't waste my time with scorpions. Cassandra's pupils dilated, her wolf surfacing in her gaze. You're insane. I'm committed. There's a difference. Alexandros laughed, sudden and bright, and it sounded almost normal, almost like a child instead of a weapon in training. Nikolaos, he called. Come meet the new maid. She's insane but interesting. The tutor appeared in the doorway with a speed that suggested he'd been listening the entire time. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes calculated Calliope like a scholar examining a new species. Fascinating. You've lasted 20 minutes without crying or bleeding. A new record. He moved into the room with casual grace, and Calliope noticed the way the twins tracked him, not with hostility, but with something almost like trust. I suppose introductions are warranted. I'm Nikolaos, son of no one important, tutor to the impossible, and the only person in this tower who's read more forbidden texts than these two combined. Calliope, daughter of. She stopped because banished wolves lost their lineage along with their pack bonds. Just Calliope now. Just Calliope who knew their mother. Just Calliope whose gambling execution to honor a blood oath. Just Calliope who... Nikolaos paused, his gaze sharpening on her wrist, on the silver mark beneath the Omega brand. Who bears a bloodline marker I haven't seen in active use since the Great Cleansing. Tell me, just Calliope, did your family serve the old gods before the Pax unified? It was dangerous knowledge, forbidden knowledge, the kind that got people burned for heresy. But something in Nikolaos's tone said he already knew the answer. My grandmother's line traces to the Oracle Pax, the ones who saw futures and spoke with spirits. We were wiped out when the first Alpha declared singular rule. Not wiped out, Nikolaos corrected softly. Driven underground, hidden, bred into submission until the gifts became dormant. He circled her like a wolf examining prey, and Calliope fought the urge to bare her throat in submission because her Omega status demanded it. But not gone. Never truly gone. And now you're here, in a tower with 2 children who shouldn't exist, teaching them what exactly? How to suppress their power. How to fit into a hierarchy that was never designed for wolves like them. I'm here to keep them alive, Calliope said firmly. Everything else is secondary. Cassandra made a sound that might have been approval or might have been a threat. We like her, Nikolaos. She doesn't pretend we're normal. Normal is a cage people build when they're too afraid to be extraordinary, Alexandros added, returning to his book. Mother used to say that. Your mother said many wise things before the childbirth fever took her mind, Nikolaos replied, his tone gentle but firm. She also said that even extraordinary wolves need to understand the rules before they break them. Which brings us to today's lesson. He clapped his hands and Calliope saw the shift, the scholar becoming teacher, the predator becoming guide. Calliope will observe this morning while we discuss pack hierarchy, the Treaty of First Blood, and why the High Council fears children like you. Because we're stronger than them, Cassandra said immediately. Because you're different from them, Nikolaos corrected. Strength they understand. Strength fits into their worldview of alphas dominating, betas following, omegas serving. But you too. He gestured between the twins, and Calliope saw what he meant. They moved in synchronization even when they weren't trying, Cassandra shifting her weight when Alexandros turned a page, their breathing matching without conscious thought. You're bonded in ways that predate the modern pack structure. Twin bonds were common in the Oracle Pax, before the cleansing. 2 souls, 1 purpose. It made them powerful and terrifying because loyalty to each other superseded loyalty to any alpha. So they killed them all, Alexandros finished flatly. We know the history, Nikolaos. Father tried to hide it, but we've read the forbidden archives in the deep library. Calliope's blood went cold. You've been in the deep library. That section is sealed under pack law. If your father found out. Father doesn't know many things, Cassandra interrupted, her golden eyes gleaming. Like how Nikolaos has been teaching us the old language. Or how we've been practicing transformation without pack bond supervision. Or how... She stopped abruptly, glancing at her brother, some silent communication passing between them. Or how you're planning something that violates every safety protocol in the palace, Calliope finished, reading the guilt in their suddenly averted gazes. Whatever it is, stop. The decree gives you 1 moon cycle to prove you can be managed. If you fail, pack law demands execution. Do you understand? Execution. Your father will have to kill you himself or step down as alpha. Father won't kill us, Alexandros said with disturbing certainty. He'd burn the whole pack down first. Which is exactly what the High Council fears, Nikolaos added quietly. They see an alpha compromised by love for feral children. They see bloodline instability. They see an opportunity to replace the Draken line with someone more compliant with their vision of order. He looked at Calliope directly. And now they see a banished Omega in a position of intimate access to the heirs. Do you think your presence here is secret? Do you think the council doesn't have spies in this palace? The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This is a trap. They want me to fail so they can declare Theron unfit for making desperate decisions. Or they want you to succeed in ways that prove the twins are controllable, Nikolaos countered. Which means you're useful to both sides of a political war you don't fully understand. He smiled, and it was sharp as knives. Welcome to the tower, Calliope. We're all prisoners here, just in different cages. The first day passed in a careful dance of boundaries and tests. Cassandra tried to set Calliope's hair on fire during lunch. Just testing your reflexes, we're not monsters. And Alexandros asked increasingly philosophical questions designed to expose weaknesses in her reasoning. Nikolaos watched it all with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment, occasionally offering cryptic comments that clarified nothing. By sunset, Calliope was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. These children were brilliant and damaged, and so desperately hungry for genuine connection that it hurt to witness. They pushed everyone away because everyone tried to tame them, to smooth their sharp edges, to make them fit into roles they were never designed to fill. You survived day one, Nikolaos said when the twins finally fell asleep. Cassandra hanging half off her bed, Alexandros curled protectively around a book. Tomorrow will be harder. Why? Calliope asked, too tired to be diplomatic. Because today they tested your fear response. Tomorrow they'll test your loyalty. He handed her a cup of tea that smelled like moonflower and regret. The council convenes tomorrow evening. They'll summon you to give testimony about the twins' behavior. Whatever you say will be used to either condemn them or save them. Choose your words carefully. What would you have me say? Nikolaos studied her for a long moment, his scholar's eyes seeing too much. The truth would doom them. Lies would expose you as an Omega without pack bonds, unable to deceive under council scrutiny. So you'll have to find the space between truth and lies where survival lives. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Selene chose well when she bound you with that blood oath. You're exactly the kind of broken they need. He left before Calliope could ask what he meant. The High Council met in the Chamber of First Blood, a stone amphitheater built when the packs first unified under singular rule. 12 seats arranged in a circle, each occupied by an elder wolf whose power and cunning had earned them positions of advisory authority to the Alpha. Theron sat at the head, his throne elevated above the council seats, a reminder that he ruled by strength and birthright. Calliope stood in the center circle, the Omega brand on her wrist visible to everyone, her banishment status hanging over her like a noose. Pack law said she couldn't be compelled to testify, but refusing would be seen as defiance and handled accordingly. Counselor Demetrius spoke first, his silver hair and ancient eyes marking him as one of the oldest living wolves. The banished Omega has spent one day with the feral heirs. This council demands her assessment. Are they salvageable, or should the decree stand? Before Calliope could answer, another voice cut through the chamber. This is absurd. She's been with them for less than 24 hours. Any assessment would be premature. Nikolaos stood in the shadows near the entrance, his scholar's robes marking him as non-political, but his presence declared otherwise. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The tutor oversteps his bounds, Demetrius said coldly. Your contract is to educate, not interfere with council proceedings. My contract is to ensure the heirs receive appropriate guidance. Condemning them based on inadequate observation violates the spirit of that contract. Nikolaos moved into the light, and Calliope saw the steel beneath his scholarly exterior. Unless this council has already decided their fate, and this testimony is merely theater. Theron's growl silenced the rising arguments. Enough. Calliope will speak truthfully or face execution for deception under Omega law. The choice is hers. His eyes met hers across the chamber, and she saw the test hidden there. He was asking if she would sacrifice herself for children she barely knew, if the blood oath to his dead mate meant more than her own survival. The answer should have been complicated, should have required careful consideration. But Calliope had stopped caring about survival the night she was banished, and some part of her had been waiting 5 years for a reason to matter again. "The twins are remarkable," she said clearly, letting her voice carry to every corner of the chamber. "Brilliant, powerful, and yes, wild. But not feral. Feral implies mindless destruction. These children are deliberate in everything they do. They test boundaries because no one has ever set boundaries they respect. They lash out because pain is the only language they've been taught." She turned slowly, meeting each council member's gaze. "You want me to say they're dangerous?" "Fine. They're dangerous the way all concentrated power is dangerous, especially when it's been neglected, misunderstood, and treated as a problem to solve rather than a gift to nurture." "Nurture." Demetrius's laugh was like stone grinding. "They've hospitalized 43 caretakers. They speak forbidden languages. They've accessed restricted archives. This is not childish rebellion. This is systematic defiance of pack law. Pack law that was written when the oracle packs were destroyed," Calliope shot back, surprised by her own boldness. "Pack law that assumes all wolves fit into neat categories of alpha, beta, omega. These children have a twin bond, something your law doesn't account for because it's based on hierarchy and they're based on partnership." She felt Nicolaus's gaze on her, approving and worried in equal measure. "You're trying to force them into a system that was never designed for wolves like them. The failure isn't theirs. It's yours." The silence that followed was absolute. Several council members looked shocked that a banished Omega would speak so directly. Others looked thoughtful, and that was somehow worse. Theron leaned forward on his throne, his expression unreadable. "You claim they're not feral. Can you prove it? Give me the full moon cycle your decree allows. If I fail, execute me alongside them. My life for their chance at proving themselves." Calliope knew she was gambling everything, but the blood oath silver mark on her wrist burned hot, and somewhere in the tower 2 children were probably listening through one of their forbidden magical contraptions, hearing an Omega stand between them and death. "Unacceptable," another counselor declared. Anastasia, a woman whose ruthlessness was legendary. "The Omega has no authority to bargain. Pack law is clear." "Pack law also says an alpha's mate bond supersedes council recommendations," Nicolaus interjected smoothly. "Selene bound Calliope with a blood oath before her death. By traditional law, that oath carries the weight of a mate's dying wish. To violate it would be..." He paused meaningfully. "Unprecedented and potentially heretical under Old Covenant law." Calliope shot him a look of pure shock. Covenant law hadn't been invoked in generations. It predated the modern pact structure and carried implications that made the council deeply uncomfortable. Nicolaus had just weaponized legal arcana to protect her, and she couldn't decide if he was brilliant or insane. Probably both. Theron's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "The tutor raises valid precedent. The council will adjourn and reconvene in 3 days to assess progress. Calliope's moon cycle begins now. If she survives and demonstrates the twins' capacity for discipline, we'll revisit the decree." He stood, and his alpha power flooded the chamber, reminding everyone who truly ruled. "This meeting is concluded." The council dispersed with clear reluctance, many of them glaring at Calliope as they passed. Demetrius paused beside her, his ancient eyes cold. "You've made powerful enemies tonight, Omega. And for what? 2 children who will likely kill you before the moon cycle ends. Such noble stupidity. Better to die for something than live for nothing," Calliope replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. His laugh was dry as desert wind. Spoken like someone who's never truly faced death. "We'll see if your courage holds when the twins show you what they're really capable of." He left, and Calliope felt her knees weaken with delayed reaction. Nicolaus appeared at her side, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've witnessed in 15 years at this palace. Possibly both." "You invoked covenant law," Calliope said numbly. Do you have any idea what kind of attention that brings? Scholars will be crawling through archives trying to find precedent, looking for ways to use it for political advantage. Let them look. The precedent exists whether we invoke it or not. Nikolaus guided her toward a side exit, away from lingering council members. Besides, those children are listening to every word through a modified speaking tube they installed in the ventilation system. They needed to hear someone fight for them without reservation. Even if you were terrified. I wasn't. Calliope stopped because her hands were shaking. Fine. I was terrified. Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. They climbed the tower stairs in silence until Nikolaus added quietly. Celine made me promise something too the night before she died. She made me swear that if her children ever needed someone to teach them the old ways, the dangerous knowledge the council tried to bury, I would do it regardless of law or consequence. I've been honoring that promise for 7 years, watching them grow into power that terrifies even their father. He looked at Calliope with unexpected intensity. Now you're here, honoring your own promise. Perhaps Celine knew exactly what she was doing when she bound us both to her children's survival. The tower door opened before they reached it. Cassandra stood in the doorway, her golden eyes shining with unshed tears. Behind her, Alexandros clutched his book against his chest like armor, but his expression was vulnerable in ways that made Calliope's heart ache. You stood in front of the council for us, Cassandra whispered. Even though you're Omega, even though they could have killed you. Someone had to, Calliope said simply, kneeling so she was eye level with both children. Your mother asked me to. And even if she hadn't, even if there was no blood oath, I would have done it anyway. Because what they're doing to you, treating you like weapons or problems instead of children, it's wrong. And I'm tired of watching wrong things happen because people are too afraid to stand up. Alexandros moved forward suddenly, wrapping his thin arms around Calliope's neck in a fierce hug that surprised everyone including himself. Cassandra joined a heartbeat later, and the three of them knelt in the doorway while Nikolaus watched with an expression that might have been satisfaction or might have been grief for something long lost. We'll be good, Alexandros mumbled against Calliope's shoulder. We'll show the council we're not feral. We promise. Don't be good, Calliope corrected gently. Be yourselves, just with enough discipline that they can't use your wildness as an excuse to destroy you. Can you do that? The twins pulled back, glancing at each other in that way they had of holding entire conversations without words. We can try, Cassandra said finally. But no promises about the scorpions. Some traditions are sacred. Calliope laughed despite everything, and the sound seemed to ease something in the tower's oppressive atmosphere. Fine. But warn me first so I can wear boots. That night, after the children finally slept, Nikolaus found Calliope on the tower balcony. She was staring out at the Pack lands, at the forest that stretched beyond the palace walls, dark and endless. You're thinking about running, he said without preamble. I'm thinking about how many ways this can go wrong. The council wants the twins declared feral. Theron is one political crisis away from losing control. And I'm a banished Omega with a target painted on my back. Even if we succeed, there's no guarantee anyone survives the moon cycle. Survival was never the goal. Nikolaus leaned against the balcony railing, his scholar's profile sharp against the moonlight. Celine didn't ask us to keep them alive. She asked us to keep them whole, to protect the essential part of who they are when everyone else wants to sand down their edges and reshape them into something manageable. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I should tell you something about Theron. Something the council doesn't know. Calliope waited, sensing the weight of whatever confession was coming. He's dying, Nikolaus said flatly. Slowly, from a poison administered during the last territorial dispute 3 years ago. The healers have managed to slow the progression, but within a year, maybe less, the poison will reach his heart and kill him. The council knows he's weakened. They can smell sickness even if they don't know the cause, and they're positioning themselves to control whoever takes the throne after his death. The twins, Calliope breathed. They'll fight over who controls the twins. Exactly. Twin heirs complicate succession. Pack law says the stronger should rule, but how do you determine strength when they're bonded so completely that separating them might break both? The council will use that ambiguity to install a regent, effectively ruling through puppet heirs until they can maneuver one of their own bloodlines into the alpha position. Nicolaus's expression was grim. Unless the twins prove themselves capable of ruling jointly, which violates 3 centuries of precedent and would require rewriting fundamental pack law. So this whole decree, the testing declaring them feral, it's all political theater. A way to either eliminate them or prove they're too unstable to rule. Now you're beginning to understand palace politics. Nicolaus smiled without humor. And you, with your blood oath and your Omega brand and your impossible courage, just became the most important piece on the board. Because if you can demonstrate that the twins are disciplined, capable, and worthy of rule despite their bond, you destroy the council's entire argument. But if you fail, they die, I die, and Theron's bloodline ends with him. Calliope felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders like physical force. Why didn't you tell me this before I testified? Would it have changed your answer? She considered, then shook her head slowly. No. The blood oath compels me regardless of politics. Celine asked me to protect her children, not navigate succession crises. Which is exactly why you might actually succeed where others failed. Nicolaus pushed off the railing, preparing to leave. The twins don't need another person trying to control them for political advantage. They need someone who sees them as children first, heirs second, weapons never. You're that person, Calliope. Even if it kills you. He left her alone with the night and her thoughts, which were considerably darker than they'd been an hour ago. Day 2 began with a test Calliope should have anticipated. She woke to find both twins standing beside her sleeping pallet, watching her with identical expressions of calculated mischief. The morning light streaming through the tower windows cast them in sharp relief, making them look older than their 7 years, ancient souls in children's bodies. We need to go into the forest, Alexandros announced without preamble. Today. Now. Calliope sat up slowly, assessing the situation. The forest is off limits. Your father's orders. Father's orders were written when we were 5 and couldn't control our transformations, Cassandra countered. We're 7 now. That's basically ancient. And there's a moonbloom flower that only grows by the old ruins. And Nicolaus said we need it for advanced transformation theory. And you want to see if I'll break rules for you the way you've been breaking them for everyone else. Calliope finished the thought they were dancing around. This is a test. Everything's a test, Alexandros said matter-of-factly. We're heirs to a throne built on blood and pack law. Our entire existence is one long examination with death as the failing grade. At least this test involves flowers. The logic was sound in a deeply disturbing way. Calliope looked between them, seeing the genuine curiosity mixed with their manipulation, the childish desire for adventure tangled with sophisticated understanding of how to play adults against their own rules. If I take you into the forest and we're caught, I'll be executed for violating direct alpha orders. Your father was clear about boundaries. But you survived 1 day. Cassandra pressed, moving closer. Which means you have 29 more days in the moon cycle. That's 29 chances to either die boringly in this tower or die interestingly in the forest, helping us learn something useful. Her grin was sharp enough to draw blood. Besides, Mother's blood oath doesn't say you have to keep us safe. Says you have to see us as more than monsters. Well, we're telling you we're scholars who need moonbloom. Are you going to see us that way or not? It was manipulation wrapped in sincerity, wrapped in genuine need. And Calliope realized she was dealing with children who'd learned to weaponize every emotion because emotion was their only currency in a palace full of people trying to control them. Nicolaus appeared in the doorway right on cue, carrying a satchel that almost certainly contained everything they'd need for a forest expedition. I see they've progressed to the blackmail portion of relationship building. How refreshing. You knew about this, Calliope accused. I suggested the moon bloom as a theoretical example during yesterday's lesson on herbology. I didn't explicitly tell them to manipulate you into violating pack law, but I also did not tell them that, and with these two the distinction is meaningless. He set the satchel down with a heavy thud. However, I would point out that the old ruins where moonbloom grows are technically on pack land but outside the palace wards. Technically. If one were to argue semantics. Semantics won't save us if we're caught. No, but covenant law might. Nicolaus's expression turned serious. The blood oath Celine made with you includes an interesting clause that's been dormant for 5 years. She swore you to protect her children's essential nature. Their wildness, their connection to old magic, their need to understand the world beyond palace walls. Keeping them locked in a tower violates the spirit of that oath even as it obeys the letter of alpha commands. You could argue legally that taking them to the ruins is oath fulfillment, not disobedience. Calliope stared at him. You're trying to get me killed. I'm trying to give you the tools to survive while doing what needs to be done. There's a difference. He moved to the window, looking out at the forest that beckoned beyond the palace grounds. The twins need to understand their own power before the council forces them into roles that will suppress it. Moonbloom has properties that enhance magical perception. It'll help them see the bonds that connect them to each other and to the old magic that flows through their bloodline. It's dangerous knowledge, but ignorance is more dangerous. And if we're caught? Calliope asked, already knowing she'd lost this argument before it started. Then we fall back on covenant law, Omega status, and the fact that I'll swear under truth magic that the expedition was my idea. The council can execute a banished Omega, but executing the twins' tutor raises uncomfortable questions about their education and why the palace is so desperate to keep them ignorant. Nicolaus's smile was sharp. I've survived palace politics for 15 years by being useful enough to protect and dangerous enough to fear. Trust me, Calliope. This is calculated risk, not suicide. The twins watched this exchange like spectators at a particularly engaging play, their expressions bright with intelligence and something that might have been hope. They wanted this, not just the adventure, but the acknowledgement that they were capable of more than the palace walls allowed. Calliope thought about the council chambers, about Demetrius's cold certainty that she'd fail, about Theron's dying secret and the political machinations that would crush these children if she didn't help them become strong enough to withstand it. She thought about Celine's blood oath burning silver on her wrist, a constant reminder of promises made and prices yet to pay. Fine, she said, and watched their faces light up with joy that was almost painful in its purity. We go at midday when the guards change shifts. We stay together, we take no unnecessary risks. And if anyone asks, this was my idea. Mine alone. Understood. Understood, they chorused, already moving to gather supplies with the efficient coordination of children who'd been planning this for days. Nicolaus caught Calliope's arm as she moved to follow them. You're braver than you know, he said quietly. Or more foolish. History will decide which. History is written by survivors, Calliope replied. Let's focus on becoming those. The forest was everything the palace was not. Wild, untamed, indifferent to hierarchy and law. They slipped past the changing guards through a passage Nicolaus knew, one that opened onto the eastern hillside where pack patrols rarely ventured. The twins moved through the trees like they'd been born to it, their small bodies navigating roots and streams with preternatural grace. Calliope followed, her Omega senses prickling with awareness that they were being watched. Not by guards or council spies, but by the forest itself, the old spirits that predated pack law, the magic that hummed beneath the surface of visible reality. Her grandmother had taught her to feel it before the oracle bloodline was declared heretical and her family scattered. Being banished had severed her pack bonds, but it had also freed her Omega senses from hierarchical suppression. She could feel the forest's ancient attention focusing on the twins like a great eye opening after long sleep. Do you feel it? Cassandra whispered, her golden eyes wide. The forest is alive. Really alive. Not just trees and animals but something else. Old magic, Nikolaos confirmed, appearing at Calliope's shoulder with his silent scholar's tread. Before the Pax unified, before hierarchy became law, our ancestors lived in harmony with wild magic. They didn't control it. They partnered with it, learned its rhythms, respected its power. The twins have that old connection in their blood, from both Selene's healer lineage and Theron's warrior line. It makes them dangerous to anyone who believes control is the only form of strength. Alexandros had stopped ahead, his hand pressed against a massive oak that must have been centuries old. His expression was distant, listening to something only he could hear. "The tree remembers," he said softly. "It remembers when our kind first came to these lands. It remembers the oracle pacts and the great cleansing. It remembers." His voice trailed off, and when he opened his eyes they were bright with tears. "It remembers Mother. She came here when she was pregnant with us. She asked the old magic to protect us." Cassandra joined her brother, pressing her small hand against the oak beside his. The two of them stood there, silent and connected, and Calliope felt something shift in the air. A recognition, a blessing, something that predated words. "The ruins are just ahead," Nikolaos said, breaking the moment gently. "Stay alert. Old magic attracts old dangers, and not everything in this forest is friendly." The ruins rose from the forest floor like broken teeth, stone walls covered in moss and vine, remnants of a temple or meeting place from before the great cleansing. Moon bloom grew in the shadows, its pale petals luminescent even in daylight, its scent sweet and slightly narcotic. The twins approached it with reverence, and Calliope saw Nikolaos's teachings reflected in their careful movements. Respect for the plant, awareness of its power, understanding that harvesting without permission was theft from the old magic. Alexandros knelt beside the largest bloom, speaking words in the old language that made Calliope's skin prickle. Asking permission, offering gratitude, promising stewardship. The flower seemed to glow brighter, and when he plucked it, the stem broke cleanly as if consenting to harvest. "Well done," Nikolaos murmured, genuine pride in his voice. "You've learned the lessons well." "We had a good teacher," Cassandra replied, carefully placing the moon bloom in the satchel. "Even if he's secretly planning to overthrow the council and install us as joint rulers in a new pact structure that honors old magic over hierarchy." The silence that followed was deafening. Nikolaos went very still, his expression cycling through shock, calculation, and something that might have been respect. "How long have you known?" "Since we were 5, Alexandros said calmly, exploring the ruins with his sister. "We found your hidden journals in the deep library. The ones where you outline political philosophy, alternative governance structures, theories about why the Great Cleansing was actually a power grab by strong alphas who feared the Oracle Pack's ability to predict and prevent their rise. We've been reading them for 2 years. And you never mentioned this because we wanted to see if you were actually committed to your ideals or just writing academic exercises," Cassandra finished. "Lots of people have revolutionary ideas when there's no risk of acting on them. But you've been teaching us dangerous knowledge, protecting us from the council, using your position to slowly undermine pack law from within. That's commitment. That's interesting." Calliope looked at Nikolaos with new eyes, seeing not just the scholar tutor but the revolutionary he'd hidden beneath layers of academic respectability. "You're using them. You're preparing them to be weapons against the current order." "I'm preparing them to be choices," Nikolaos corrected sharply. "When Theron dies and the council moves to install a regent, these children will face 2 options: submit to control or fight for autonomy. If they fight, they need to understand what they're fighting for. Not just personal freedom, but a restructuring of pack law that acknowledges the diversity of wolf nature instead of forcing everyone into 3 rigid categories." His eyes blazed with suppressed passion. "The Great Cleansing destroyed 1/3 of our population because alphas feared sharing power with wolves who had different gifts. That fear built a hierarchy based on strength and submission, on dominance and control, on crushing anything that didn't fit the pattern. I won't let that same fear destroy these children just because they're inconvenient to people who profit from the status quo." "So you're a revolutionary," Calliope said slowly. And you've been training them to lead a revolution. I'm a scholar who believes the truth matters more than comfort, Nikolaos replied. And yes, if teaching them history that the council tried to bury, magic that pack law forbids, and philosophy that challenges alpha supremacy makes me a revolutionary, then guilty as charged. He looked at Calliope directly. The question is what you'll do with this knowledge. Report me to Theron and ensure the twins lose the only teacher who's ever encouraged their full potential. Or accept that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do for children is tell them the truth and trust them to choose wisely. Calliope thought about the blood oath burning on her wrist, about Celine asking her to see the twins as more than monsters, about the council's cold calculation and Theron's dying secret, and the impossible political maze that would consume these children if someone didn't give them tools to navigate it. Mother knew, Alexandros said quietly, drawing their attention. He stood in the ruin's center, where moonlight somehow penetrated despite the forest canopy. She knew about the council's plans, about the poison-killing father, about how we'd be used as political pawns. That's why she made blood oaths with both of you. She was building us a foundation of people who'd choose truth over safety when the time came. How could she have known? Calliope asked. She died giving birth to you. Oracle blood, Cassandra said simply, joining her brother in the moonlit center. Healer gifts run in her line, but further back, generations back, there's oracle magic, prophecy, foresight, the ability to see paths that haven't been walked yet. She saw what was coming and bound you both to us with oaths that would activate when we needed you most. She looked at them both with eyes too old for her young face. So stop pretending you have choices. You're oath-bound. The only question is whether you'll fight with us or watch us fight alone. Before either adult could respond, the forest went silent. Every bird stopped singing. Every insect ceased buzzing. The kind of silence that preceded predators. We're not alone, Nikolaos said softly, his hand moving to the knife hidden in his robes. Calliope's omega senses screamed warning. Something was coming through the trees. Multiple somethings, moving with coordinated precision. Not animals. Not spirits. Wolves. Pack wolves. Coming fast. Run, she commanded, grabbing both twins and pulling them toward the path back to the palace. But Cassandra resisted, her small body suddenly immovable. No, the girl said, and her voice carried power that made even Calliope's omega nature hesitate. Running makes us prey. We stand. You're 7 years old. We're heirs to the throne of the strongest pack in the Western Territories, Alexandros interrupted, taking his sister's hand. And we've been trained by the best warrior tutor in the palace and the most dangerous revolutionary scholar alive. If someone's hunting us, let them come. The wolves emerged from the trees. 6 of them, wearing council colors, led by a beta Calliope recognized as one of Demetrius's personal guards. Their expressions said this wasn't a rescue mission. It was a test, or worse, an assassination disguised as an accident. The banished Omega has violated pack law by removing the heirs from palace grounds, the beta announced, his voice carrying formal accusation. By council authority, you're all under arrest for endangering royal bloodline. We're on pack land, within the territory bounds defined by the Treaty of First Blood, Nikolaos replied calmly, stepping forward to position himself between the twins and the guards. No law has been violated. The Alpha declared the forest off-limits to his children. That decree supersedes territorial boundaries. The Alpha's decree was verbal, not written, which means it's subject to interpretation under covenant law. We interpreted it as a recommendation rather than a command, given that no formal documentation exists. Nikolaos' scholar training showed in every word, finding legal loopholes where others saw only restriction. If the council wishes to challenge our interpretation, they're welcome to convene a formal hearing. Until then, we'll return to the palace voluntarily. The beta's smile was cold. I'm afraid it's not that simple. The council has concerns about the tutor's influence on the heirs. You'll all return to the palace, but the tutor will remain here for questioning. In the forest. Alone. Calliope's blood went ice cold. Alone meant without witnesses. Questioning meant torture or worse. They were going to eliminate Nikolaos and claim he'd been killed by forest dangers while violating pack law. No, Cassandra said, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Frost formed on nearby leaves despite it being high summer. The twins' power manifested in the air between them and the guards, visible as shimmering distortion like heat haze, but cold enough to burn. Touch our teacher and we show you what feral really looks like. The guards hesitated. Even trained warriors thought twice about attacking children who could manipulate temperature through sheer will, especially children who might someday rule their pack. But the beta had his orders. The heirs are disturbed, as the council suspected. We'll be doing them a service by removing corrupting influences. He signaled his guards forward. Calliope's Omega brand burned hot on her wrist, and she felt something shift inside her. The suppressed oracle blood recognizing a moment of destiny, a pivot point where choices would echo through generations. She stepped forward, putting herself between the guards and the twins, between violence and children, between the future and the past that wanted to destroy it. I invoke covenant law, she said clearly, using the formal language Nikolaos had weaponized in the council chamber. By blood oath sworn to Selene Draken, mate to Alpha Theron, I claim protection of these heirs as my sacred duty. Any who would harm them or their designated teachers must first pass through me. This is my right under ancient compact, predating the Great Cleansing, binding by old magic that your council has no authority to violate. The words came from somewhere deep, from the oracle bloodline that had been driven underground but never extinguished, from the part of her that remembered when Omegas weren't the lowest rank but simply wolves with different gifts. Foresight, healing, empathy, connection to wild magic. The silver mark on her wrist blazed with light, and the forest responded, vines creeping forward, trees seeming to lean in, old magic recognizing one of its own finally speaking with power. The guards stopped, uncertainty clear on their faces. The beta's expression went calculating. You're banished. You have no pack authority. Banishment severs pack bonds, not blood oaths. Covenant law predates pack structure. You know this. Calliope felt Nikolaos beside her. His presence solid and supporting. Felt the twins behind her, their power feeding into hers through connections she barely understood. If you want to challenge covenant law, you'll have to kill me first. And when the Alpha learns you murdered his dead mate's oathbearer while trying to assassinate his children's tutor, there won't be enough of this council left to hold a meeting. The standoff stretched like a wire about to snap. Then the beta made his decision, stepping back with visible reluctance. The council will hear about this. Covenant law won't protect you forever. It only needs to protect us until these children prove themselves worthy of rule, Nikolaos replied softly. After that, they'll be strong enough to protect themselves. The guards withdrew, melting back into the forest with obvious frustration. Calliope waited until their sense faded completely before letting herself collapse against the nearest tree, shaking with reaction. The twins were beside her instantly, Cassandra's small hands surprisingly warm as they steadied her. That was amazing, Alexandros breathed, his eyes shining. You invoked covenant law without any formal training. How did you know the ritual words? I didn't, Calliope admitted. They just came. Like something inside me remembered even though I'd never learned them. Oracle blood, Nikolaos confirmed, examining her wrist where the silver mark still glowed faintly. The gifts skip generations sometimes, lying dormant until crisis forces them to surface. Your grandmother had prophecy. Your mother had healing. You. He looked at her with new respect and something that might have been concern. You have authority. The ability to speak words that reshape reality, to invoke laws that bind even those who don't acknowledge them. It's rare, dangerous, and exactly what the council fears most in anyone who isn't them. I'm not trying to be dangerous, Calliope said weakly. I'm just trying to keep 2 children alive. Sometimes those are the same thing, Cassandra replied with 7-year-old wisdom that shouldn't have been possible. Come on. We need to get back before someone else decides to test us. The return to the palace was tense but uneventful. The guards at the gate noted their absence but said nothing. Either they hadn't been informed of the forest incident or had been ordered to ignore it. Calliope couldn't decide which was worse. They made it to the tower without encountering anyone important. Nikolaos deposited the moonbloom in his research area, handling it with reverent care, while the twins crashed immediately into their respective sleeping spots with the abrupt energy drain of children who'd spent hours maintaining magical manifestations. "They'll sleep for 12 hours at least," Nikolaos said, draping blankets over both small forms. "Manifesting power at their age takes enormous energy. They'll be hungry and cranky when they wake, but unharmed. Unlike us," Calliope said, examining her wrist where the Omega brand and oracle mark seemed to have merged, creating a new symbol that didn't exist in any pack law she'd ever studied. "What happens now? The council knows we went to the ruins. They know we're actively working against their plans. They'll escalate. Undoubtedly." Nikolaos moved to the window, looking out at the palace grounds where shadows grew long in the late afternoon sun. "But they'll also be cautious. You invoked covenant law successfully, which means there are legal protections they can't simply ignore. They'll try to undermine us politically rather than attack directly. Expect summons to explain ourselves, formal inquiries into the twins' education, attempts to separate us from the children." He glanced at her. "And they'll target you specifically. A banished Omega invoking ancient law is either a threat to be eliminated or a weakness to be exploited. They'll dig into your past, find out why you were banished, use it to discredit anything you say or do." Calliope's stomach twisted. The secret she'd protected for 5 years, the crime that had earned her banishment and Omega branding, was about to become a weapon used against these children. "What do I do?" "Tell me," Nikolaos said simply. "Tell me what you did that was worth banishment, and we'll figure out how to turn their weapon against them." She should have refused. Should have kept her secret sealed behind the shame and pain that had defined her exile. But Nikolaos was right, the council would use it anyway, and going in blind was suicide. "I saved a child," Calliope said quietly, the words tasting like ash. "A child who was supposed to die under pack law. An Omega child born to an Alpha bloodline, which meant genetic weakness, potential for corrupting the line, all the old prejudices about Omega status. The parents were going to expose it on the mountain, let it die of cold rather than raise something they considered defective." She met Nikolaos's eyes. "I stole the baby. Smuggled it out of pack territory to a distant relative who promised to raise it without pack bonds, free from hierarchy and judgment. When I returned, the parents had reported the theft. The Alpha had no choice but to enforce pack law, and I was banished for violating sacred parental rights and endangering bloodline purity." Nikolaos was quiet for a long moment. "Where's the child now?" "Safe. Growing up human adjacent, no pack bonds, no knowledge of what was almost done to them. Free." Calliope's voice broke slightly. "Worth it. Even if it cost me everything. The council will frame you as a child stealer who can't be trusted with the heirs. They'll say your banishment proves you put personal feelings above pack law, that you're exactly the kind of corrupting influence they warned against." Nikolaos's tone was analytical, but his eyes were kind. "They'll be right about one thing. You do put children's welfare above pack law. But we'll argue that's exactly what makes you perfect for this position. Celine chose you because she knew her children would need someone willing to break unjust laws to protect them. Will anyone believe that? The twins will. Theron might if we present it correctly. The council won't, but they're not our audience." He moved away from the window, pulling books from shelves with the efficient speed of someone who knew exactly what he needed. "We have 27 days left in the moon cycle. In that time we need to achieve 3 things. Demonstrate the twins are disciplined enough to rule, establish legal precedent for twin sovereignty under covenant law, and expose the council's plan to install a puppet regime. Simple, really. That's impossible. So was invoking covenant law without training, yet you managed it." Nikolaos's smile was sharp. "We're not trying to win by overwhelming force. We're trying to win by rewriting the rules while our opponents are still playing the old game. Now, let's discuss political theory and why the Great Cleansing was actually the worst mistake our ancestors ever made. They worked through the night, building strategy from history and law, finding loopholes in pack structure that had existed for centuries but never been exploited. Calliope learned that Nicolaus's revolutionary ideas weren't just academic exercises. He'd been laying groundwork for years, cultivating allies among younger pack members, slowly shifting perspectives through his students, preparing for a moment when change became possible. "The twins are that moment," he said as dawn colored the eastern sky. "They're powerful enough that no one can simply dominate them into submission. They're sympathetic enough, young, orphaned by their mother, threatened by the council, that people will want to protect them. And they're twin-bonded, which means they naturally challenge the hierarchy's assumption that only one alpha can rule. If we can keep them alive and position them correctly, they become the foundation for restructuring pack law into something more just." "You're talking about revolution," Calliope said, exhausted but strangely energized. "Using children as revolutionary symbols." "I'm talking about evolution. The revolution already happened. It was called the Great Cleansing, when alphas consolidated power by destroying everyone who threatened their dominance. What we're doing is showing there's another path, one where power is shared, where different gifts are valued, where being Omega or Beta or having twin bonds doesn't make you expendable." Nicolaus closed the last book with quiet finality. Celine saw this coming. She knew her children would be the catalyst. That's why she bound us both to them, not just to keep them alive, but to help them become the change our people desperately need. Calliope wanted to argue, wanted to insist they were just trying to protect two children from unjust execution. But she'd felt the old magic in the forest, had seen the way the twins connected to power that predated pack hierarchy, had invoked covenant law that still held binding force despite centuries of attempts to suppress it. Maybe Nicolaus was right. Maybe this was bigger than survival. Maybe it was destiny, written in oracle blood and blood oaths, and two 7-year-olds who refused to be anything less than extraordinary. The twins woke at midday, ravenous and cranky as predicted. Cassandra demanded honey cakes and stories about their mother. Alexandros wanted to know everything about the confrontation with the guards, asking tactical questions that suggested he was already planning future encounters. They were impossible and brilliant and utterly exhausting. They were also, Calliope realized with growing warmth, starting to trust her. Not completely. Trust took time they might not have, but enough to show vulnerability, enough to ask questions without testing, enough to accept comfort when nightmares woke them. On day 5, Cassandra had a screaming fit that shattered 3 windows and brought palace guards running. Calliope held her through it, weathering the storm of rage and fear until the girl collapsed sobbing into her arms. "I miss Mother," Cassandra whispered into Calliope's shoulder. "Everyone says we're like her, but we never knew her. And it hurts that everyone expects us to be something we can't remember." "Then be yourselves," Calliope replied, stroking the wild blonde hair. "Your mother would want that more than anything, for you to be free to become whoever you're meant to be, not shadows of who she was." On day 8, Alexandros finally asked the question he'd been holding back. Why did our mother die? Was it really just childbirth? Or was it something else? Nicolaus fielded that one. His scholar's voice gentle but truthful. "The healers did everything possible, but sometimes even the strongest wolves can't survive twin births. Your mother's body couldn't sustain both of you and herself. She chose you. She made that choice willingly, with full knowledge of the cost. It wasn't your fault. It was her gift to you, life at the price of her own." The boy processed this with disturbing composure, then nodded slowly. "Then we have to make it worth it. We have to become strong enough that her sacrifice means something." "You already are," Calliope assured him. "Just by being yourselves, by surviving in a palace that wants to crush your wildness, by refusing to be less than you are. You honor her every day." On day 12, the council summoned them all for a progress review. The chamber was full, every seat occupied, and Calliope felt the weight of political attention like physical pressure. Theron sat his throne, looking older than he had 2 weeks ago, the poison eating at him from within even as he maintained alpha authority through sheer force of will. Demetrius spoke first, his ancient eyes cold on Calliope. 2 weeks have passed since the banished Omega began her assignment. The Council requires assessment of progress toward the decree's resolution. Calliope stood with the twins flanking her, Nikolaos slightly behind, a united front against judgment. The heirs have demonstrated significant progress in emotional regulation, scholarly achievement, and social cooperation. They've completed advanced studies in pack history, magical theory, and political philosophy. They've shown respect for authority when that authority is earned rather than demanded. They've proven themselves capable of discipline when given reasons to care about outcomes. Pretty words, Counselor Anastasia interrupted. But we've heard reports of an unauthorized expedition to the forest ruins, manifestation of dangerous magic, and confrontation with pack guards. This suggests the opposite of discipline. That suggests children exercising their natural gifts under supervised conditions, Nikolaos countered smoothly. The forest expedition was part of their education in herbology and connection to pack lands. The magic manifestation was defensive, used appropriately when threatened. The confrontation with guards occurred because those guards were attempting unlawful detention based on misinterpretation of Alpha Decree. If anything, the twins' behavior demonstrates sophistication beyond their years. They understood their legal rights and defended them without causing permanent harm to anyone. Murmurs rippled through the council. Several members looked uncomfortable, either because Nikolaos had just accused the guards of operating outside law, or because the defense was actually legally sound. Theron leaned forward, his gaze intense on his children. Alexandros. Cassandra. You will tell this council in your own words, whether you believe you're fit to inherit pack leadership. No coaching. Just truth. The twins glanced at each other, that silent communication flowing between them. Then Alexandros stepped forward. We don't want to inherit pack leadership, he said clearly, and shock rippled through the chamber. We want to transform it. Before anyone could interrupt, Cassandra continued. Pack law says the strong rule and the weak submit. But strength isn't just physical power, it's intelligence, empathy, creativity, the ability to see solutions where others see only problems. Mother knew that. She was strong because she healed, because she understood people, because she could look at someone broken and see how to make them whole. Her golden eyes swept the council. You want us to be weapons. We want to be builders. You want us to maintain hierarchy. We want to question whether hierarchy serves everyone or just the people on top. That's not feral. That's honest. And if honesty makes us unsuitable for rule, then maybe your definition of suitable is what needs to change. The silence that followed was absolute. Calliope felt her heart hammer against her ribs, knowing the twins had just committed political suicide or sparked a revolution, and either way there was no going back. Then, impossibly, Theron laughed. It was rough, pained, but genuine. You sound like your mother. She used to lecture me about leadership and responsibility, about how strength without wisdom was just violence wearing a crown. He looked at Demetrius directly. My children have shown more wisdom in 2 weeks with proper guidance than this council has shown in years of political maneuvering. The decree is satisfied. They're not feral. They're exactly what this pack needs, whether we deserve them or not. Alpha, you cannot, Demetrius began, but Theron's growl silenced him. I can and I have. The moon cycle isn't complete, but the question has been answered. My heirs will receive full education and preparation for joint rule. Anyone who opposes this decision is welcome to challenge me for alpha status according to pack law. His smile showed teeth. Any volunteers? No one moved. Theron was dying, but he was still powerful enough to tear apart any individual council member in ritual combat. The challenge stood unanswered. Council dismissed, Theron declared. Except you, Calliope. We need to discuss your continued position. The council filed out with obvious reluctance, most of them shooting dark looks at Calliope that promised retribution later. Nikolaos shepherded the twins toward the exit, But Cassandra pulled free, running back to throw her arms around Calliope's waist. "Don't let them hurt you," she whispered fiercely. "You're ours now." Then they were gone, and Calliope stood alone before the alpha of the Silverstone pack, knowing her fate balanced on his next words. Theron descended from his throne slowly, and up close Calliope could see the poison's toll gray undertone to his skin, slight tremor in his hands, the way he moved carefully as if pain waited in every gesture. He studied her with eyes that had buried a mate and faced his own mortality and learned to see past surface to truth beneath. "Nikolaos told me what you did," he said finally. "Why you were banished. Saving an Omega child condemned by pack law." Calliope's breath caught. He had no right. He had every right. "You're caring for my children. I needed to know if your criminal history posed a threat." Theron moved to the window, looking out at pack lands that would soon pass to new hands. The parents of that child were Counselor Demetrius's nephew and his mate. "Did you know that?" She hadn't. The revelation hit like physical impact. The child would have been Demetrius's grandnephew, a direct bloodline descendant with Omega status, something he considered genetic poison. He ordered the exposure personally, invoked old law that's technically still valid even though it hasn't been enforced in generations. Theron's laugh was bitter. You saving that child wasn't just defiance of pack law. It was direct interference with council bloodline politics. Demetrius has wanted you dead ever since, but banishment was all he could legally arrange given the Omega status of the child involved. Killing a banished Omega to protect a condemned infant would have raised uncomfortable questions about his commitment to pack law versus personal prejudice. "I didn't know," Calliope said numbly. "I just saw a baby who was going to die for being born different, and I couldn't let it happen." Which is exactly why Selene chose you for her blood oath. She knew that when the council came for our children, and they would come, she saw that much in her oracle dreams. We'd need someone who'd already proven they'd sacrifice everything for innocence condemned by law. Theron turned to face her directly. "I'm dying, Calliope. Poison, administered during a diplomatic meeting 3 years ago. Slow enough that I didn't notice until it was too late. The healers give me a year, maybe less. When I'm gone, the council will move against my children. Demetrius wants them declared unfit, wants a puppet alpha installed, wants to restructure pack leadership so the council controls succession instead of bloodline." "Nikolaos told me some of this," Calliope admitted. "He's been preparing them to fight back." "I know. I've known for years that my tutor was a revolutionary scholar teaching my children forbidden history and dangerous ideas. I allowed it because..." Theron's voice cracked slightly. "Because Selene asked me to. Her last words before she died weren't, 'I love you,' or, 'Take care of our children.' They were, 'Let Nikolaos teach them the truth.' She knew. Somehow, through oracle blood or healer intuition or just profound wisdom, she knew that our children would need to understand the lies pack law was built on if they were going to survive the council's machinations. Calliope felt pieces clicking together. A conspiracy of hope built by a dying woman who'd seen futures and chosen the path most likely to protect her children. She planned all of this. The blood oaths, Nikolaos's teaching, my return. She was building them an army of allies who'd choose truth over law when the moment came. "Not an army," Theron corrected gently. "A family. Pack bonds are based on hierarchy and dominance. Family bonds are based on choice and love. She was giving our children the second thing, because she knew the first would be used to destroy them." He moved closer, and his alpha presence wrapped around Calliope, not threatening but evaluating. "Your banishment is pardoned, effective immediately. Your Omega status is complicated. The brand can't be removed without killing you. It's blood magic tied to your life force. But I can declare your rank restored to Alpha adjacent, give you back your family name, restore your pack bonds." It was everything Calliope had dreamed of for 5 years. "Yet, what's the cost?" she asked quietly. "You don't offer gifts without strings, especially not to someone the council wants dead." Theron's smile was sad. "The cost is simple. Stay. You protect my children when I'm gone. You help them navigate the political nightmare that's coming. You teach them to be strong without becoming cruel, powerful without becoming tyrants, rulers without becoming dictators. His hand covered hers, and she felt his alpha power flowing through the touch, recognizing her oracle blood as equal rather than subordinate. Selene bound you with a blood oath. I'm asking you to choose the same path freely. Not because magic compels you but because you believe they're worth saving. Will you? Calliope thought about Cassandra's fierce hugs and Alexandros's impossible questions. Thought about Nicolaus's revolutionary dreams and the old magic stirring in ancient forests. Thought about a condemned Omega infant growing up free somewhere far from pack law, living proof that sometimes the most radical act was simple kindness. Thought about Selene seeing all of this from her deathbed and building hope from blood oaths and desperate choices. I'll stay, she said. Not for rank or pardon or pack bonds. I'll stay because those children deserve a world that doesn't crush them for being extraordinary. And if I can help build that world, then yes. Choose this. Freely. Theron's relief was palpable. He pulled her into an embrace that was more grateful than authoritative, and Calliope felt his tears dampen her shoulder. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving them a chance I can't provide. For fighting battles I won't live to see. For choosing them when it would be easier to walk away. When they separated, his alpha authority was back in place, but something had shifted between them. An acknowledgement of shared purpose, of standing together against coming darkness. The Council will accelerate their plans now that the decree has been satisfied, Theron said, returning to practicalities. Expect formal challenges to Nicolaus's teaching methods, attempts to separate you from the children, legal maneuvering around twin sovereignty. Demetrius won't move openly until I'm dead, but his allies will chip away at your position, looking for weaknesses. He handed her a sealed document. This is my official pardon and rank restoration. Keep it close. When I'm gone, it'll be one of the few shields you have against council authority. Calliope took the document with shaking hands, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. What do I tell the twins? Tell them the truth. They're old enough to understand, and they deserve honesty more than protection from harsh reality. Theron moved toward the throne room exit, then paused. Calliope. That child you saved. Demetrius's grandnephew. Do you know where they are now? She hesitated, then decided truth was worth the risk. Safe. Growing up in the Eastern Territories, raised by a distant cousin who married human adjacent. They'll never know what was almost done to them. Good. Theron's expression softened fractionally. When this is over, when my children have secured their rule and restructured pack law, that child deserves to know they have family who'll welcome them home. Remember that. Remember that we're fighting for a world where being different isn't a death sentence. He left, and Calliope stood alone in the empty council chamber, holding a pardon that changed everything and understanding that the real battle was just beginning. Days 15 through 20 passed in intense preparation. Nicolaus accelerated the twins' education, teaching them political philosophy, legal theory, historical precedent for challenging pack law. Calliope worked on emotional intelligence, helping them understand manipulation versus honest persuasion, teaching them to read people's intentions beneath polite words, preparing them for council chambers where every sentence carried multiple meanings. The twins absorbed it all with frightening speed. They were 7 years old but carried themselves with the gravitas of wolves 3 times their age. Their twin bond made them devastating in debate. Alexandros would start an argument and Cassandra would finish it, their thoughts flowing together so seamlessly that opponents couldn't find gaps in their logic. On day 18, Counselor Anastasia visited the tower unannounced, ostensibly to evaluate the heirs' educational progress. She watched them work through complex legal problems, parse ancient texts, demonstrate their magical control. Her expression gave nothing away, but Calliope felt the calculation behind those cold eyes. Impressive, Anastasia said when the demonstration concluded. They're certainly intelligent enough to rule. But intelligence without loyalty to pack law is dangerous. Tell me, children, if you became alpha, would you uphold our traditions or destroy them? It was a trap question. The wrong answer would be used as evidence of their unsuitability. Alexandros looked at Cassandra, their silent communication flowing, then answered with careful precision. Pack law exists to protect wolves and maintain order. But when law becomes a weapon used to hurt innocents or maintain unjust hierarchy, then law needs examination. We'd uphold the traditions that serve everyone and question the ones that serve only the powerful. That's not destruction, that's evolution. And who decides which traditions serve which purpose? Anastasia pressed. You. 2 children who've barely lived 7 years. No, Cassandra replied firmly. Everyone decides. That's the point. Right now, the Council and Alpha make all decisions. What if instead we had assemblies where all pack members, Alpha, Beta, Omega, could voice concerns and propose changes? What if tradition evolved through consensus instead of being imposed from above? Her golden eyes were steady. You're afraid we'll destroy hierarchy. We're trying to transform it into something more just. There's a difference. Anastasia was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You sound like idealistic revolutionaries. The Council will eat you alive. Maybe, Alexandros acknowledged. Or maybe we'll expose them as relics clinging to power they haven't earned. Time will tell. After Anastasia left, Nikolaos pulled Calliope aside, his expression grave. That wasn't evaluation. That was reconnaissance. She's going to report back to Demetrius, and they'll prepare a more sophisticated attack. We're running out of time. We still have 10 days in the moon cycle. Theron collapsed this morning during a private meeting with his healers. The poison is accelerating. They're giving him weeks now, not months. Nikolaos's hands clenched into fists. When he dies, all protection we've built around the twins evaporates. Demetrius will move immediately to install a regent council, bypass twin sovereignty, effectively imprison them in the palace until they're old enough to rule, which he'll ensure never happens by gradually stripping their authority until they're figureheads with no real power. Then we accelerate our plans, Calliope said, feeling the blood oath burn hot on her wrist. We've spent 3 weeks building legal foundation and proving the twins' capability. Now we use it. We call for a full pack assembly, invoke covenant law to demand public testimony, force the council to justify their positions in front of everyone instead of in closed chambers. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let's make them defend their corruption where all can see it. Nikolaos stared at her. That's actually brilliant and potentially suicidal. Pack assemblies haven't been called in 2 generations. The council banned them after the last one resulted in mass challenges to leadership. Reviving the practice now would destabilize every power structure they've built. Good, Calliope replied with more confidence than she felt. Let it destabilize. Let wolves see that change is possible, that questioning authority isn't heresy, that their voices matter. The twins can't rebuild pack law if everyone's too afraid to imagine alternatives. You sound like a revolutionary, Nikolaos said, echoing Anastasia's earlier words, but his tone carried approval rather than criticism. I sound like someone who's tired of watching powerful people crush innocents because it's convenient. If that makes me a revolutionary, so be it. They presented the plan to Theron that evening, finding him in his private chambers, attended by healers who could do nothing but manage his pain. He looked terrible. The poison had aged him years in weeks, carved his face into sharp planes of suffering, but his mind remained sharp. A pack assembly, he repeated slowly, considering the implications. You understand what you're asking. Every wolf in our territory, gathered to witness and testify. The council won't be able to control the narrative, but neither will we. It'll be chaos, unpredictable, dangerous. It'll be democracy, Alexandros corrected, standing with his sister at the foot of their father's sickbed. Something our pack hasn't experienced in living memory. We're not asking permission, father. We're informing you that we'll call the assembly ourselves under covenant law if we have to. But we'd prefer your support." Theron looked at his children, and Calliope saw pride and grief warring in his expression. "You've grown so much in 3 weeks. Your mother would be." His voice broke. "She'd be proud. So proud of the wolves you're becoming." He coughed, and blood flecked his lips, testament to the poison destroying him from within. "Call the assembly. I'll support it officially, which gives you legal cover. But Alexandros, Cassandra, understand that once you do this, there's no going back. You're declaring war on the council, on pack hierarchy as it currently exists, on generations of precedent. They will fight you with everything they have." "We know," Cassandra said softly, taking her father's hand. "But we'd rather fight and fail than submit and watch everyone else suffer under unjust law. Mother taught you that, didn't she? That leadership means protecting those who can't protect themselves, even when it costs you everything." "She did," Theron admitted. "And I've failed that teaching more often than I've honored it. Don't make my mistakes. Be better than I was. Build the world she dreamed of, even if I won't live to see it." He looked at Calliope and Nikolaos. "Protect them. Whatever it takes. Promise me." They promised, sealing it with words that carried the weight of blood oaths and desperate hope. The pack assembly was called for the next full moon, 5 days away. The announcement sent shockwaves through pack territory. Older wolves remembered the last assembly, remembered the challenges and chaos and how close the pack had come to splintering. Younger wolves saw opportunity, a chance to voice frustrations that had been building for years under council control. Demetrius responded with formal protest, demanding the assembly be cancelled on grounds of public safety and pack stability. Theron overruled him with alpha authority that left no room for argument, and the council was forced to accept. But they didn't sit idle. On day 23, Calliope woke to find guards surrounding the tower. Not hostile, not yet, but present. A clear message that the twins were being protected in ways that looked suspiciously like house arrest. Nikolaos was barred from entering that morning, told his teaching contract was under review by the council pending investigation into his methods. The twins reacted with cold fury that manifested as frost spreading across every surface in the tower. "They're trying to isolate us," Alexandros said, his breath misting in suddenly frigid air. "Separate us from our allies before the assembly. Then we remind them why that's a bad idea," Cassandra replied, her golden eyes gleaming with power that made even Calliope nervous. "No," Calliope said firmly. "No displays of raw power. That's what they want. Evidence that you're unstable, dangerous, in need of council control. We play this smart." She moved to the window, assessing the guard positions. "Nikolaos can't enter through the front, but there are other ways into this tower. Service passages, old routes from when the palace was a fortress. He'll find us. Meanwhile, we prepare your testimony for the assembly. If you can speak truth with conviction, no amount of council manipulation can stop it." They worked through the day, crafting arguments and practicing delivery. The twins had brilliant minds, but they were still children, prone to distraction and frustration. Calliope found herself being teacher, protector, mediator, and sometimes just a presence who refused to give up on them when they wanted to give up on themselves. "Why do you care so much?" Alexandros asked during a rare quiet moment. "You've been pardoned. You could leave, start over somewhere far from here. Why stay when it's so dangerous?" Calliope considered several diplomatic answers, then settled on truth. "Because 5 years ago, I saved a child that pack law said should die. I've spent every day since wondering if that choice mattered, if that one life was worth everything I lost. Then I met you too, and I realized you're that child. Not literally but spiritually. Your innocence being condemned by law that values conformity over compassion, strength over wisdom, tradition over justice. If I walk away from you, then I'm saying that first child was the exception, that I don't actually believe what I claimed to believe." She met their eyes. "I stay because you prove that my choice 5 years ago was right. That some lives are worth fighting for, regardless of what law says. Cassandra hugged her fiercely, and Alexandros joined them, and for a moment they were just a woman and two children holding onto each other against a world that wanted to tear them apart. Nikolaos arrived after midnight, slipping through a service passage that opened behind a bookshelf. He brought news. Demetrius is gathering allies for the assembly. He's promising council positions to anyone who speaks against the twins' capacity to rule. He's also digging into your past, Calliope. Found out about the child you saved, discovered it was his grandnephew. He's preparing to publicly denounce you as a child stealer who violated his family's rights. Let him, Calliope said, surprising everyone including herself. Let him tell the whole pack that I saved an Omega infant from exposure because his family considered genetic diversity a crime. Let him explain why pack law allows executing children for being born different. We'll use his accusation to expose exactly the kind of prejudice we're fighting against. Nikolaos grinned. Turning their weapons into our advantages. Like it. What else? They strategized until dawn, building arguments upon arguments, preparing for every possible council countermove. The twins absorbed it all, their brilliant minds synthesizing complex concepts into clear moral positions. They weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were advocating for systemic change, and they understood the weight of that responsibility. The full moon rose on day 28. The pack assembly ground was a natural amphitheater in the forest, carved by ancient magic, capable of holding thousands. Every wolf in the Silverstone pack territory was required to attend under Alpha Decree. Pack law said assemblies were sacred, opportunities for grievances to be aired and justice to be pursued outside normal channels. The crowd was massive, overwhelming. Calliope stood with the twins and Nikolaos in the center of the amphitheater, feeling the weight of hundreds of gazes. Theron sat above them on a raised platform, looking frail but determined. His alpha authority still present despite the poison eating him alive. The council occupied positions around the amphitheater's rim, Demetrius prominent among them. Theron's voice, magically amplified, rang out across the assembly. We gather under pack law and covenant tradition to address questions of succession, leadership, and the future of our people. The heirs, Alexandros and Cassandra, will present their vision for pack governance. The council will present objections. All will testify truthfully or face consequences for deception. Let the assembly begin. Demetrius rose immediately. Before the heirs speak, this council must address a matter of trust. Their primary caretaker, Calliope, is a convicted criminal, banished 5 years ago for theft of an Omega child condemned under pack law. She violated sacred parental rights, stole from this council's own bloodline, and has never shown remorse for her crimes. How can we trust heirs educated by someone who disrespects law so fundamentally? Calliope felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her, judgment forming before she could respond. But then Alexandros stepped forward, his young voice carrying surprising authority. The Omega child Calliope saved was condemned because Counselor Demetrius believed Omega status corrupted alpha bloodlines, a prejudice based on hierarchy, not genetics. She stole a baby that was left to die of exposure on a mountain. That's not theft. That's rescue. If respecting pack law means letting children die because they're born different, then pack law is immoral and deserves to be challenged. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Demetrius's expression darkened. Your children. You don't understand the complexities of bloodline management, the importance of genetic purity. We understand that people use fancy language like bloodline management and genetic purity to justify cruelty, Cassandra interrupted, her golden eyes blazing. We understand that you wanted a baby dead because they were Omega, because you value hierarchy over life, control over compassion. And we understand that if Calliope hadn't broken your law, an innocent would have died to satisfy your prejudice. We honor her for that crime. We hope to commit similar crimes ourselves, choosing justice over unjust law, choosing protection over politics, choosing life over tradition when tradition demands death. The assembly exploded into noise. Cheers and protests mixing, wolves shouting support or condemnation. Theron had to roar for silence, his alpha power flooding the amphitheater until every voice stilled. "The heirs have spoken," Theron declared. "Now let them present their full vision. Alexandros, Cassandra, tell our pack what you propose." The twins glanced at each other, then moved to the center together, hands joined, their twin bond visible in the way their power synchronized. Alexandros spoke first. "We propose pack assemblies become regular, yearly gatherings where any wolf can bring grievances, propose law changes, challenge unjust decisions. We propose that leadership be evaluated not just by strength but by wisdom, compassion, strategic thinking, and ability to serve all pack members. We propose that Omega, Beta, and Alpha classifications become descriptive rather than prescriptive, acknowledging different gifts without forcing hierarchy." Cassandra continued seamlessly. "We propose that twin bonds be recognized as valid leadership structures, that orphan children be protected regardless of bloodline complications, that healing and scholarship be valued equally with warrior strength. We propose that the Great Cleansing was a mistake, that destroying oracle packs and forbidden bloodlines made us weaker, not stronger, and that reclaiming lost wisdom is necessary for our survival. We propose," they said together, their voices unified and powerful, "that strength without justice is tyranny, and that our pack deserves better than tyranny wearing a crown." The silence that followed was profound. Then slowly wolves began to stand. First one, then another, then dozens, then hundreds. Not all of them, not even most, but enough to show that the twins' words resonated, that change wasn't just possible but desperately desired. Demetrius stood as well, his ancient face twisted with rage. "This is heresy. You're proposing the destruction of pack hierarchy, the abandonment of traditions that have kept us strong for centuries, the embrace of weakness disguised as compassion." He pointed at the twins accusingly. "They're children playing at revolution, influenced by a banished Omega and a radical tutor who's been teaching them forbidden history. They're not fit to rule. They're dangerous idealists who'll destroy our pack trying to build an impossible utopia." "Then challenge them," a voice called from the crowd. An older beta, scarred from decades of pack service. "If they're so unfit, challenge their authority. Prove their weakness through ritual combat. That's our way, isn't it? The strong rule and the weak submit. Let's see if your strength matches your words, counselor." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Pack law was clear. Any wolf could challenge leadership through ritual combat, and the victor's position stood validated. But Demetrius couldn't fight children without appearing monstrous, and he couldn't champion without admitting he feared their power. "They're 7 years old," Demetrius protested. "Ritual combat is for adult wolves. They're 7 years old and proposing systemic overhaul of pack structure," another wolf countered. "If they're old enough to revolutionize our society, they're old enough to defend their right to do so. Or we could acknowledge that maybe physical combat isn't the best way to determine leadership, which I believe was part of their proposal." Laughter spread through the crowd, not cruel but pointed. Demetrius had been outmaneuvered by his own logic, trapped between the hierarchy he defended and the impossibility of using it against children. Theron rose from his platform, and his presence silenced everything. "My children have presented their vision. The council has presented objections. Now I will speak as Alpha, possibly for the last time." His voice carried pain and pride in equal measure. "I'm dying. Poison administered years ago by enemies who wanted to destabilize our pack is finally succeeding. Within weeks, maybe days, I'll be gone. When that happens, pack law says succession passes to the next generation. My children, Alexandros and Cassandra." Gasps echoed through the assembly. Many had suspected, but confirmation of the Alpha's mortality shifted every calculation. "The council believes they're unfit because they're young, because they're twin-bonded, because they question tradition. I believe they're exactly what our pack needs. Fresh eyes, uncorrupted by political compromise, brave enough to name injustice when they see it." Theron's gaze swept the assembly. "But I'm one voice. This is your pack as much as mine. So I put it to assembly vote, as is my right under covenant law. Do we accept the twins as joint heirs with full authority to pursue the reforms they've proposed? Or do we reject them and allow the council to install a regent until alternative leadership can be arranged? All in favor of the twins, stand and be counted. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the scarred beta who'd spoken earlier stood. Then others joined, younger wolves mostly, but also some older ones who'd lived through enough council politics to recognize corruption. More and more stood until perhaps half the assembly was on their feet, their support visible and undeniable. All opposed stand now, Theron commanded. The other half stood, led by Demetrius and his council allies. The pack was split almost perfectly down the middle. Change versus tradition, hope versus fear, revolution versus status quo. The assembly is divided, Theron said heavily. Under ancient law, when an assembly splits this evenly, the Alpha's decision carries weight equal to 10% of votes. I cast my authority with my children. The heirs are confirmed. Their proposed reforms will be implemented over the next generation, with oversight by an expanded council that includes representatives from all ranks. Omega, Beta, Alpha. Objections must be presented through proper channels, not through political sabotage or assassination attempts disguised as accidents. He stared directly at Demetrius on the last words, making the accusation clear. The old counselor's face went pale with rage, but he couldn't respond without confirming the charge. This assembly is concluded, Theron declared. The twins will undergo full Alpha training beginning tomorrow. Calliope's banishment is permanently pardoned, her rank restored. Nikolaos continues as primary tutor with expanded authority to establish new curriculum. The council will submit to yearly assembly review of their decisions. This is my command as Alpha. Challenge it through legal means or accept it. Choose. No one challenged. The risk was too great, the momentum too strong. Demetrius and his allies melted back into the crowd, defeated but not destroyed, certain to regroup and try again when Theron's protection was gone. The twins stood in the center of the amphitheater, looking small and impossibly brave, having just declared war on centuries of tradition and survived the first battle. Calliope moved to them, placing protective hands on their shoulders, while Nikolaos positioned himself as guardian against threats still lurking in the crowd. "You did it," Calliope whispered to them. "You actually did it." "We're not done," Alexandros replied, his young face showing wisdom beyond his years. "This was just the beginning. The real work starts tomorrow." "Then tomorrow we work," Cassandra agreed. "Together. All of us." Theron descended from his platform slowly, each step clearly painful, and embraced his children with fierce love. "Your mother would be so proud," he said again, tears streaming down his face. "So proud of the wolves you're becoming, the future you're building. I'm sorry I won't be here to see it completed." "You'll see it," Alexandros insisted. "We'll make you proud, Father. We promise." But promises couldn't stop poison, couldn't heal what was broken beyond repair. They all knew Theron was living on borrowed time, that the countdown had begun toward a succession crisis that would test everything they'd built tonight. The next 10 days passed in intense preparation. The twins underwent formal Alpha training, combat, strategy, diplomatic protocol, resource management. They excelled at some aspects, struggled with others, but approached everything with a fierce determination that had become their signature. Calliope worked alongside them, learning leadership techniques herself because the twins insisted they wanted her counsel during their rule. Nikolaos established the new curriculum, bringing in scholars who'd been suppressed by the council, recovering texts from the forbidden archives, slowly building an educational system that valued critical thinking over obedience. Young wolves flocked to these new classes, hungry for knowledge that had been denied them. Theron's health declined rapidly. By day 35, he couldn't leave his bed. By day 37, he could barely speak. The healers did what they could, but the poison had won, and everyone knew it. On day 38 of Calliope's moon cycle, 10 days past the original deadline that had been rendered irrelevant by the assembly, Theron called them all to his chamber one final time. Calliope, Nikolaos, and the twins gathered around his deathbed, watching the strongest alpha their generation had known fade into something fragile and mortal. "Listen carefully," Theron whispered, his voice barely audible. "Demetrius will move against you the moment I'm gone. He'll claim the assembly vote was coerced, that I used alpha power to manipulate the outcome, that the twins aren't ready for rule. He'll try to install himself as regent, controlling them until they're adults, which means controlling them forever through political pressure and legal manipulation." "We'll fight him," Cassandra said fiercely. "We won the assembly vote." "The assembly vote gives you legal standing, not power," Theron interrupted with surprising strength. "Power comes from allies, from respect, from proving yourselves day after day until no one can question your authority. You'll need to be smarter, faster, more ruthless than anyone expects 7-year-olds to be." His gaze fell on Calliope. "You swore to protect them. Now I'm asking you to do more. Become their regent yourself. Not to control them but to shield them while they grow into their power. Demetrius can't challenge an official regent without looking like he's power-hungry. Use that." Calliope felt her heart stop. "I'm not qualified. I'm Omega rank, barely pardoned, with no political experience. You're oath-bound by their mother, pardoned by their father, supported by the most dangerous scholar in the palace, and you've already proven you'll sacrifice everything for children's welfare. That's not just qualified, that's perfect." Theron coughed, blood staining his lips. "Nikolaos will handle political strategy. You'll handle emotional stability and public presence. Together, you'll keep them alive until they're old enough to rule independently. Will you accept this responsibility?" What choice was there? The blood oath had already bound her to their survival. This was just making it official. "I accept," Calliope said, and felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders like physical chains. "Good." Theron turned to his children, and his expression softened into something purely parental. "You're going to face challenges I can't protect you from. People will underestimate you because you're young, dismiss you because you're different, fear you because you're powerful. Don't let them make you cruel. Don't let them convince you that survival requires becoming like them. Your mother believed strength and kindness could coexist. Prove her right. Be the leaders she dreamed you could become." "We will," they promised, both crying openly now. "We will, Father. We swear it." Theron smiled, and it was the first genuinely peaceful expression Calliope had seen on his face since returning to the pack. "Then my work is done. Selene is waiting for me somewhere beyond this life. I'm ready to see her again, to tell her that our children are going to change the world." His eyes drifted closed. "Tell them I love them. Tell them I died believing in them. Tell them." His voice faded, his breathing slowed, and then stopped. The alpha of the Silverstone pack, strongest warrior of his generation, devoted father, and reluctant revolutionary, passed into whatever waited beyond life with his children's names on his lips. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Then Cassandra threw back her head and howled, a sound of grief and rage and terrible loss that echoed through the palace and across the pack lands. Alexandros joined her, their twin voices unified in mourning, and wolves throughout the territory stopped what they were doing to answer, adding their voices to the chorus until the night itself seemed to keen with sorrow. Calliope held them both while they grieved, her own tears falling freely, mourning a wolf she'd barely known but had learned to respect in the brief weeks they'd worked together. Nikolaos stood guard at the door, his expression grim, because grief was a luxury they couldn't afford for long. The council would move before dawn. The real fight was about to begin. As promised, the city you're watching from. Tell me in the comments so I can send that hug. Because what comes next is the true test. 2 7-year-old twins against a council that's had centuries to perfect political warfare, a banished Omega serving as regent with enemies on all sides, and a revolutionary scholar teaching them how to burn the world down and rebuild it better. The blood oaths have been fulfilled. The assembly has spoken. The old alpha is dead. Now we find out if hope is enough to survive what's coming. Or if the council's coldest truth, that strength will always crush idealism, is right after all. The story is just beginning. The real question is whether anyone will survive long enough to finish it.